After losing his bandmate in a tragic car crash, this legendary lead singer was ready to throw it all away. His music career, as far as he was concerned, it was over. He'd come so close to that big break so many times, and it just always fell apart. It was a mic drop in the worst way possible. But then, if you can believe it, his mom talked him out of quitting. His mom. She promised him something good was about to happen, and she was exactly right. Not long after that, he was recruited by the manager of an iconic band to be their frontman. Only there was a catch. They already had a lead singer. So going undercover as part of this band's road crew, he laid low until this manager could fire the other singer. And when he finally had his chance, he didn't disappoint. 6 multi-platinum albums later, this musician is recognized as one of the greatest rock voices of all time, my favorite for sure. And today, we're telling the story, including an interview, coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you ever had a members-only jacket from back in the day, you're going to dig this channel of potent musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now so you always know when our interviews are coming out. We also have a Patreon that helps us keep it a daily channel, helps us do more interviews, and helps the content flowing. Can also become an honorary producer on our stuff. So it's time for another edition of the show, one of my favorites, #1 in our hearts. This is the show that honors songs that were so unbelievably great. They absolutely should have been #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. But for whatever reason, be it radio play, label support, lack of marketing, or just sheer stupidity, the song came up short. Today's episode, we're going with a band that had 18 top 40 hits in the US, but never had a #1. Closest they ever got was #2. Today, we're going to rewrite history, though, and it should have been, and we're going to give Journey a #1 hit. The song, Steve Perry's debut track with the band, Lights.
When the lights go down in the city.
So by the summer of 1977, Journey was 3 albums into their young career. Their self-titled debut dropped in April of 75. Look Into the Future was released in January 76. Next came up next on February 77. All 3 records struggled here in the US, averaging 108 on the Billboard 200. Since their formation in 73, Journey had already been through some lineup changes, moving on from drummer Perry Prince and guitarist George Tickner. Talked about that a little before. So that meant at this point, the band consisted of Santana alumni, the brilliant Neal Schon on guitar and Greg Raleigh on keys and occasional vocals, plus Ross Valerie on bass and Ainsley Dunbar on drums. The reason for Journey's struggles to break through on both the album and the singles chart were simply that they weren't really a commercially driven band at that point. On their first few albums, Journey was kind of replicating Santana's approach. Instrumental rock fusion with lyrics and vocals kind of as an afterthought. Journey was opening for big-time acts like Emerson, Lake and Palmer and, of course, Santana. And they were playing all these big outdoor shows, but really the exposure wasn't translating to record sales. And that wasn't sitting well with their label, Columbia Records. They want you to sell records. So Columbia basically told them they could either get a frontman and start writing commercially viable songs, or they'd have to start looking for a new label. It was, of course, a bitter pill to swallow, but the band understood the reality. So in June of 77, they brought in Californian Robert Fleischman, a relatively unknown singer at that point. Robert quickly assimilated and began co-writing a couple songs, most notably Wheel in the Sky, which would be released as the lead single on Journey's 4th album, Infinity.
Ooh, the wheel in the sky keeps on turning.
Fleischman also joined Journey on tour, opening for ELP. However, it would be a short, roughly 4-month stay for the frontman, who, as it turned out, wasn't the only lead singer joining the band for the tour. You may have heard of this other guy. His name is Steve Perry. That's right, Steve was also in play to become Journey's lead vocalist at that point, only the band didn't really know it. Steve joined Journey on the road as a behind-the-scenes addition, instigated by band manager Herbie Herbert. So Herbie wasn't a big fan of Robert Fleischman. He later called a pain in the ass and a pampered poodle. More on all that coming up, but let's talk about Steve Perry for a minute. Raised in Lemoore, California, at age 18, Steve Perry moved to LA to chase his rock and roll dreams. The legendary vocalist paid his dues singing radio and TV ads and working as an engineer at Crystal Studios. Steve Perry was also a drummer and a singer for a number of obscure bands, as well as the up-and-comer outfit called Alien Project. Alien Project caught the ear of a couple of labels, including Columbia, who got a hold of their demo tape. But just as that demo was making the rounds through the Columbia brass, tragedy struck in a big way. Alien Project's bassist Richard Michaels Haddad died in a car accident over the 4th of July weekend. Completely broken up, Steve Perry took this as a sign that his music career was essentially over. He'd known failure before, and this felt like the final straw. Said Steve, and I quote, "I started to pack it in and called my mom to say I'm coming back home. It felt like the closer I got to achieving my dream, the bigger something in my life would say, no. At that point, I'd never been so close to someone who had died, and I thought, I'm not supposed to do this." End of quote. But Steve had a wonderful mother with inspired intuition, and she convinced him not to give up, promising that something will happen. And you know what? Something did happen. Steve got a call from Columbia's Don Ellis, who told him that Journey's manager, Herbie Herbert, had heard his tape, and he loved it. Before the accident, Herbie had wanted to manage Alien Project along with Journey, but in light of recent events, Herbie came up with a new plan. He proposed that Steve Perry become Journey's new lead singer. But according to Herbert, he had to talk Steve into it. He said, and I quote, "I brought that up to him and he didn't want to do it. Not only did he not want to do it, the band didn't want to hear anything about it. They loved Robert Fleischman. I guess the guys thought Robert was more of an edgy rock singer and, Steve was too much of a crooner, is what I've heard. But obviously things were about to change in a big way. Steve Perry was already familiar with Journey. He'd seen them play many times in Los Angeles, and he was a big fan of Neal Schon. So after he reconsidered Herbert's offer, Steve joined Journey on tour as, get this, part of the road crew. Or at least that was his cover. Herbie told him he had to blend in and wait for his chance. He'd get it. Herbert was going to get Robert out and then Steve Perry in as the frontman, whether the rest of the band liked it or not. Steve Perry's moment came after Robert gave the band an ultimatum of sorts. He wanted to sing more of Journey's new material in concert, the songs that he had a hand in writing. And he told them that they didn't change up the set list. He wasn't going on stage to sing at all. It was just the excuse that Herbie Herbert needed. He fired Robert on the spot. Turning to the band, he told them, Steve Perry is your new singer, and they better get used to it. The guys were really shocked, but then they were like, all right, let's see what this guy can do. And honestly, with Steve on the mic, it didn't take long for the band to come around. I mean, who can't see that he has a phenomenal voice? And Perry Herbert found a vocalist with unlimited range and bona fide star power. Crooner or not, Perry's soaring tenor, his songwriting talent, and his polished onstage presence were exactly what Journey needed to level up into power-packed arena rockers. I mean, can you imagine Journey in the late 70s and the 80s without Steve Perry? It was a match made in heaven. For Journey's next album, Infinity, and beyond, Perry became the center point of attention for this band. Steve completely immersed himself in songwriting with all the band members, but he spent most of his time with the great Neal Schon. I mean, Steve and Neal established a really strong rapport, easily on the short list of the greatest singer-guitar duos in rock history. Their emphasis was on fully formed songs with melodies and hooks. Perry would be credited on 8 of the album's 10 songs. Produced by Roy Thomas Baker, Infinity was released in January of '78 and reached number 21 on the US charts. It was their highest chart ranking for that point, and by far, jumping 64 spots higher than their previous album Next. And much of that is thanks to today's featured track, Infinity's classic opener, Lights.
And the sun shines on the bed.
Lights was the world's official introduction to Steve Perry. You think about it. Dropping the needle on Infinity for the very first time, this track opens up a completely new world to the ears, one that you never knew was possible. 14 seconds in, you get your first taste of that Steve Perry ecstasy as he launches into the song singing When the Lights Go Down in the City. And then almost 3 minutes later, as Lights comes to a close, it's clear that your life is never going to be the same again. This song is simply majestic, and Perry's voice completely steals the show on this song.
I wanna be there, yeah, in my city.
Lights was one of Steve Perry's first Journey songs, and it was recorded soon after he joined the band. Of course, it's a song all about San Francisco, but actually it started out as an ode to LA. In one interview, Steve Perry said that he wrote almost all of it in Los Angeles and it was about Los Angeles. The words were, "When the lights go down in the city and the sun shines on LA." He didn't like the way that it sounded though, so he shelved it. And then his life changed forever. He was now joining Journey, who were based out of San Francisco. It worked. Said Perry, and I quote, "I love San Francisco, the Bay and the whole thing. The Bay fits so nice when the lights go down in the city and the sun shines on the Bay. It was one of those early morning going across the bridge things when the sun was coming up and the lights were going down. It was just perfect." Now, as we'll hear in just a moment, Steve finished writing the song with guitarist Neal Schon in something like 20 minutes. Once they got going, these two just clicked. Now, let's get into the interview and see what Neal says about it. As we do, I want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear. Get ready for summer and shop Zenni's non-prescription tinted shades. You can also get prescription lenses on those as well. Enhance your look while protecting your eyes with a plethora of options and colors. Get up to 80% off regular retail prices by clicking on our info button right up here or below. Here's Neal with the interview.
I don't know what my favorite song is. I think for Journey, I love a lot of our stuff for different reasons. I've always loved Lights because that was like the second song I wrote with Perry. It was about San Francisco and
Your town.
We almost like won the song of San Francisco over Tony Bennett. And he nudged us out by a few points, but that's a classic song for us to play in San Francisco. And
the theme to my prom.
And I like the Strat, the whole Hendrixy vibe. I stuck to what he brought to me. He brought me a melody, the verses that he had, and a bass notes, and I kind of like wrapped the chords around it and, finished the thing out with him. We were at Greg's house, and Greg had a music room downstairs. It was like two-level house, and there was some bean bags sitting around there, some musical instruments that we would jam once in a while. And I had a Strat down there, a guitar, and Steve started singing the chorus and some of the verses, and so I just, I started like rapping some like Jimmy chords around it, his melody, and it all kind of just fell out. And then I came up with the bridge, and then the guitar solo. And it was like, literally like, 25 minutes.
It just came together.
It was done. And so he had a lot of it in his head. And it definitely was about San Francisco, not LA.
I love that.
I mean, he even says it on the Captured record.
Yeah.
You go back and listen, this is a song about our hometown, San Francisco.
Absolutely.
Or most recently, he's saying it's about LA. And I'm like, no, you can't do that, man. Not right now. It's etched in stone. I mean, it's become like, a San Francisco song for years because we were from there.
Go down in the city.
So Lights was the third single released off of Infinity. It was issued in August of 1978, and surprisingly, it didn't chart all that well, at least on the Billboard Hot 100. It went to 68. On the Cashbox chart, it did one better at 67. It went to number 74 in Canada. Journey was really still flying under the radar at this point. But we all know that wouldn't last. In the years to come, Lights would be one of Journey's most popular songs, becoming a classic rock radio staple. It's gone on to tally over 100 million streams on Spotify alone. As far as pop culture goes, honestly, Lights is woefully underrepresented. It does make an appearance in 2013's The Heat, starring Sandra Bullock and Melissa McCarthy. As far as I can tell, that's about it. It's a real head-scratcher. Lights has also been covered by Brandi Carlile, Yacht Rock Review, Melissa Etheridge, Green Day, and The Killers have a cool version.
Go down in the city.
Of course, it's a Bay Area sports scene favorite. It's been played at 49er games like crazy, Golden State Warrior games, and at both San Francisco Giants and Oakland Athletics baseball games, including versions led by the man himself, Steve Perry, multiple times in the World Series.
In my
Lights, of course, was only the beginning of the Steve Perry era of Journey. While his parent album Infinity did go triple platinum, there were still much bigger things to come for this band. With Steve Perry in the driver's seat as lead singer, Journey was on an irreversible crash course to superstardom. 1979's Evolution reached number 20 on the US album charts. 1980's Departure went to number 8. 1981's Escape went to number 1. Frontiers in 83 went to number 2, and Raised on Radio got to number 4 in 86. In total, they would all sell over 25 million copies in the US alone. Now, we've been down this road before in previous Journey episodes, but I'm going to repeat it in a different way. The Steve Perry-led version of Journey, it's given us some of the most monumental arena rock standards ever committed to record. Hit after hit after hit. And they're not just hits. I mean, they're the very soundtrack of our lives. Half of it, though. I have to mention Don't Stop Believin', which was iTunes' best-selling song from the 20th century. And of course, Forbes just named it the biggest song of all time in an article. Don't stop believing. And it's fitting that when Steve Perry heard about this, he paid tribute to his mom, his parents, in a message, heartfelt message. He wrote, and I quote, "When this Don't Stop Believin', the biggest song of all time article came out, I was so emotionally stunned. To be a part of such a moment as this made me reflect on my parents. By that I mean, though I lost them both years ago, I was so happy for them because they are truly the reason this is happening. My dad was a singer and both of them were very musical. So on behalf of my mom and dad, I thank every one of you for so many years of support." It was his mom that told him that something good was going to happen. Journey at their peak had tremendous chemistry. The phenomenal vocal acrobatics and feeling of Steve Perry, the voice, the sacred melodic playing of Neal Schon, with Jonathan Cain adding even more depth when he joined. Truly one of America's greatest bands. I think America's band of the 80s, right there with R.E.M. There is, of course, a whole saga of hiatuses, hard feelings, breakups, and would-be reunions we could throw into the mix. Steve Perry did rejoin the band for their 10th studio album, 1996's Trial by Fire. Man, I was so pumped for that one. That one went platinum in the middle of grunge and featured the top 10 single in the Hot 100, When You Love a Woman. It went to number 1 on the AC charts. That's a story for another day. There's been acrimony between Perry and the band over the years. But I want to go out on a positive note here. So let me mention that in 2017, Neal Schon began dedicating Lights to Steve Perry in concert. The song that started it all. It was a peace offering from the guitarist to the singer and a reminder of how all the good times started. You know, how the song stalled at number 68, I'll never know. But how Journey never had a number 1 hit, I'll never know. But we've righted a long overdue wrong here and put this iconic classic where it belongs, in the coveted number 1 spot. Nobody deserves it more than Journey. So I'm going to end on Neal Schon playing a rendition of Lights with the Golden Gate Bridge and the city behind him. A few years back, we actually spent a couple days interviewing, and I asked him if he'd do this. So we climbed up this hill, and he set up, and we filmed it, and it's really quite magical. Here it is. us a comment about this perfect song, about Steve Perry, Neal Schon, Jonathan Cain, who came later. This band, truly one of the greatest bands of all time, one of my favorites. So we're hitting 1 million subscribers. I want to do a special tribute to my favorite singer of all time, one of my favorite guitarists of all time, Neal Schon. Let's have a great discussion about Journey. What would you like to see? Could you imagine if they actually had a reunion? That would be something special. Who knows? Leave us a comment. Let's have a discussion. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe below. We'd love to have you. Until next time, telling you 3 chords and the truth, my friends.